I always knew my neighbor Karen was the nosy, entitled type, but I never thought she'd go as far as she did. It all started when I got a brand new mountain bike for my birthday. A sleek, jet black beauty with neon green accents, top-tier suspension, and a frame so light I could lift it with one hand. It was my pride and joy, a gift from my hard-working parents, who had saved up for months to surprise me. Every time I took it out for a ride, I'd notice Karen watching from her porch, arms crossed, eyes narrowed with a calculating glint. First, I brushed it off. She was always meddling in other people's business, a self-appointed neighborhood watchdog with an inflated sense of authority. But soon, her stares turned into comments, offhand remarks about how I didn't need such a fancy bike, or how her son, Lucas, would appreciate it more. I'd chuckle awkwardly, dismissing her passive-aggressive tone, but the tension only escalated. One afternoon, as I was locking my bike in the garage, Karen approached me directly. "You know, Lucas has been wanting a bike like that for ages," she said, flashing an artificial smile. "It would be so kind of you to let him ride it." Her voice dripped with faux sweetness, but her eyes betrayed her true intentions. "Sorry, Karen," I replied politely but firmly. "It's my birthday gift. I worked hard to prove to my parents I deserved it." Her smile faltered. "Oh, come on," she pressed, crossing her arms. "You don't even use it every day. It's selfish to keep something like that all to yourself when other kids would appreciate it more." I shook my head and turned away, but I could feel her burning gaze drilling into my back. Over the next few days, the situation grew worse. Karen began complaining to other neighbors, saying I was spoiled and greedy. I heard whispers about how it's just a bike, and how kids these days don't understand sharing. But what really set off alarms was when Lucas himself confronted me. "My mom says you're being selfish," he muttered bitterly. "I could really use that bike, you know?" I sighed, realizing Karen had been feeding him entitlement like a daily meal. "It's mine, Lucas," I said simply. "Your mom doesn't get to decide that." He stormed off, and I thought that would be the end of it. But then, things got even creepier. One evening, I found my garage door slightly open, despite being sure I had locked it. Nothing was missing, but my bike had been shifted, almost as if someone had tried to take it but got interrupted. My heart pounded as a chilling realization settled in. Karen wasn't just talking anymore. She was plotting, and when she finally made her move, she made the biggest mistake of her life. Because that night, she didn't just face me. She faced my grandma. I had a bad feeling in my gut when I went to bed that night, a nagging instinct that something was off. Maybe it was the way Karen had been acting, the way her beady eyes locked onto my bike every time I rolled it into the garage, or how Lucas had walked away from our last conversation with a smirk that didn't sit right. Either way, I wasn't entirely surprised when I woke up to the sound of a faint metallic clatter outside. My eyes snapped open, and I sat up in bed, heart pounding in the darkness. The sound had come from the garage. My pulse quickened as I tiptoed to my window, peeking through the blinds just in time to see a shadowy figure creeping toward the side door of our garage. My stomach twisted. Someone was trying to break in. Adrenaline shot through me as I grabbed my phone, my first instinct being to call my dad. But before I could even unlock the screen, another figure emerged from the darkness, short, solid, and moving with the kind of quiet precision that sent chills down my spine. It was my grandmother. Grandma had been staying with us for the past few months, ever since my grandpa passed. She was in her late 70s, but she wasn't fragile, far from it. She had grown up in a rough neighborhood, raised 5 kids practically on her own, and worked as a nurse for decades. She was old-school tough, the kind of woman who didn't flinch at danger. And, more importantly, she had been in the military when she was younger. I watched as she moved through the shadows, her sharp eyes locked onto the garage like a predator stalking its prey. She had clearly heard the noise too. I could barely breathe as I crept closer to the window, watching the scene unfold. The garage door was slightly ajar, just enough for someone to slip through. And then I saw her, Karen, wearing all black like some wannabe cat burglar, her dyed blonde hair barely tucked under a ridiculous beanie. She was hunched over my bike, struggling to lift it as quietly as possible. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, her movements frantic. It was obvious she hadn't planned this well. She hadn't even realized my bike was locked to a metal bracket on the wall. Still, she yanked and twisted at it, determined to steal what she believed was rightfully hers. The sheer audacity made my blood boil. But Karen had no idea that she was about to experience something far worse than getting caught by me or my parents. As she fumbled with the lock, a slow creak echoed through the garage, the sound of the side door being pushed open. Karen froze. She barely had time to spin around before the light above her flickered on, casting a harsh glow over the scene. And standing there, with a look so cold it could freeze fire, was my grandma. "I know you ain't stupid enough to be stealing from my family," Grandma said, her voice low and deadly calm. Karen recoiled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I was just what?" Grandma took a step closer. "You were just breaking into my son's house? Just trying to steal my grandbaby's bike?" Karen's hands shot up defensively, her voice climbing an octave. "I wasn't stealing. I was just borrowing it for Lucas. He deserves it more than your grandson does." My grandma's expression didn't change. She simply folded her arms and let out a slow, deliberate sigh. "You really expect me to believe that nonsense?" Karen let out a nervous laugh, clearly realizing she had underestimated the situation. "Look, I know this looks bad, but—" Grandma cut her off. "Oh, it don't just look bad, sweetheart. It is bad." Karen took a step back, glancing toward the garage entrance as if considering running for it. But before she could make a move, my grandma did something that made my jaw drop. She stepped forward with lightning speed, reached out, and grabbed Karen's wrist in an iron grip. Karen yelped, her face twisting in shock as she struggled against Grandma's grasp. "Breaking and entering is a crime, honey," Grandma said, her voice still eerily calm. "And in my day, criminals didn't get off easy." Karen's breathing turned erratic. "You can't touch me. That's assault," she shrieked, twisting and flailing. But Grandma didn't let go. "No, you assaulted common sense the second you stepped into my family's garage," Grandma retorted. "You think just because you stomp around this neighborhood like you own it, you can take whatever you want? That ain't how the world works." Karen's face turned red. You were just about to get your behind handed to you by a 78-year-old woman," Grandma cut in. "But lucky for you, I'm feeling generous tonight." Karen stilled. What does that mean?" Grandma narrowed her eyes. "It means you have two choices. One, I call the cops and you get arrested for breaking and entering. You can explain to them why you think stealing from a teenager is a good life choice. Or two, you march yourself right back to your house, and you never, ever come near my grandson's things again." Karen blinked rapidly, her mind clearly racing. I could practically see the internal battle playing out behind her eyes. She wanted to argue, wanted to throw another fit about how unfair it was that I had the bike and her son didn't. But at the same time, she was facing down an old woman who looked like she wouldn't hesitate to drag her out by her ear if she so much as breathed wrong. Karen swallowed hard. "Fine," she spat, her voice shaking. "I won't touch the bike." Grandma finally let go of her wrist and stepped back, her sharp gaze never leaving Karen's face. "That's right, you won't." Karen stumbled back toward the entrance of the garage, rubbing her wrist like she had just survived a battlefield. As she turned to flee, Grandma delivered one last parting shot. "And if I so much as see you snooping around here again," she said, "I won't bother with warnings. Next time, I will call the cops." Karen hesitated for half a second before bolting into the night, disappearing into the shadows like a burglar who had just escaped with her life. My heart pounded as I watched her go, but more than anything, I was in awe of my grandma. She had handled the entire situation without breaking a sweat. And the craziest part? She barely even raised her voice. When she finally turned and spotted me watching from the window, she smirked and shook her head. "Some people got no shame, baby," she muttered. "Now go back to bed. Your bike's safe." But something told me this wasn't the last we'd hear from Karen. And I was right, because the next day, She did something that made the whole neighborhood turn against her for good. The morning after Karen's failed heist, I woke up feeling like the world had shifted overnight. Something was different. Something was brewing in the neighborhood. As I stepped outside to grab the morning paper, I saw neighbors lingering on their porches, chatting in hushed but excited tones. Their heads turned as I walked down the driveway, their gazes flicking between me and Karen's house like they were waiting for something to explode. And when I saw my grandma sitting on our porch swing, arms crossed, sipping her coffee with a smug little smirk on her face, I knew she had something to do with it. "Morning, baby," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "You sleep well." I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and nodded slowly. "Yeah. What's going on?" Before she could answer, a loud, piercing shriek cut through the morning air. "Karen, you did what?" I nearly jumped out of my skin as a voice bellowed from across the street. I turned my head just in time to see Karen's husband, Mr. Simmons, a usually quiet, unassuming guy who kept to himself, standing on their porch, holding something in his hand. His face was twisted in shock, pure disbelief pouring from his expression as he waved a piece of paper in the air. The entire neighborhood fell silent as we all waited for the explosion. Karen stumbled out onto the porch, her face flushed red. "Honey, I can explain." "Explain?" he barked, holding the paper up for dramatic effect. "Explain this? This is a trespassing notice from the police." "Karen, what the hell did you do last night?" A slow grin spread across my face. Grandma had followed through with her warning. Karen's eyes darted toward our house, and when she saw my grandma watching from the porch, her face contorted in fury. That woman. She threatened me. Don't you dare." Her husband cut her off, his voice trembling with fury. "Don't you dare try to pin this on someone else. I want the truth, Karen. Right now." Karen spluttered, her hands flailing as she tried to twist the situation. I was just trying to get a bike for Lucas. It's not fair that spoiled brat next door has such a nice bike when—" "Stop!" Mr. Simmons ran a hand through his hair, looking like he was about to lose his mind. "You broke into their garage? You tried to steal from them? Do you have any idea how insane that is?" Karen's lips twisted into a pout. "It's not stealing if it's for the greater good." Dead silence. Then laughter. It started as a chuckle from Mr. Rodriguez, the older guy 2 houses down. Then Mrs. Patel from the corner house let out a snort. Soon, the entire block was laughing. People were shaking their heads, covering their mouths, some even doubling over with mirth. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. Karen, the self-righteous neighborhood menace, was being humiliated in front of everyone. "Oh, that's rich," someone muttered. "Karen, you've done some crazy things before, but this?" Another neighbor chimed in. Karen's face burned crimson as she realized the entire neighborhood had turned against her. "It's not my fault," she shrieked. "This is a conspiracy against me. Everyone is ganging up on me." Grandma let out a dramatic sigh from our porch, standing up and dusting off her hands like she was done dealing with nonsense. "Baby, ain't nobody conspiring against you. You did this to yourself." Karen spun toward her like an angry tornado. "You set me up. You!" Grandma stepped forward, raising a single finger, and like magic, Karen's rant died in her throat. "You listen here, Missy," Grandma said, her voice calm but firm. "I told you to keep your hands off my grandson's bike. I warned you, but you thought you were above consequences, didn't you? Thought you could take whatever you wanted just because you felt entitled to it." She shook her head, disappointed. "But guess what? The world don't work that way. You don't get to steal from kids and play the victim when you get caught." Karen's bottom lip trembled. "But Lucas—" "I don't want to hear it," Grandma interrupted. "You ain't teaching that boy nothing but how to be a thief. And shame on you for that." Karen's mouth snapped shut. It was the first time I had ever seen her truly speechless. Mr. Simmons sighed deeply, looking like he had aged 10 years in the span of 5 minutes. "I swear, Karen," he muttered, "you have embarrassed this family for the last time." Karen's head whipped toward him. "Honey, wait, No, he said firmly. I am done. You're gonna march your butt over there and apologize. To the kid, to his family, and to his grandmother. And then you're going to find a way to fix this mess. Because I will not have you dragging our son into your entitled nonsense. Karen stood there, looking as if she'd rather choke on nails than apologize. But with the entire neighborhood watching, waiting for her next move, she had no way out. Slowly, stiffly, she turned toward me and Grandma, her lips pressing together like she was trying to keep herself from exploding. I apologize, she muttered, voice barely above a whisper. What was that? Grandma asked, cupping a hand to her ear. Speak up, baby. Karen clenched her fists, nostrils flaring. I apologize for breaking into your garage, she spat. And for trying to take the bike. Grandma nodded, satisfied. That's a start. Now, why don't you do something productive for once and buy your kid his own bike? The crowd murmured in agreement, and for the first time in years, Karen had nothing to say. That was the beginning of the end for her reign of entitlement. Word spread like wildfire through the neighborhood, and suddenly, people weren't tolerating her antics anymore. No more passive-aggressive notes. No more ridiculous complaints. People stopped inviting her to community events, and Lucas, realizing just how much his mom had embarrassed him, started avoiding her in public. As for me, my bike stayed exactly where it belonged, safe and sound in my garage. And every time I rode past Karen's house, feeling the wind rush past me, I couldn't help but smile, because in the battle of Karen versus Grandma, there had only ever been one winner. And it sure as hell wasn't Karen.